1 year after the Battle of Valoran's Gate, the galaxy looked very different. The Great Hall of Concordia Prime had been rebuilt. The old design, with its elevated throne for the High Arbiter and its tiered seating that showed clear hierarchy, was gone. The new hall was circular, with every delegation having equal position. No one sat higher than anyone else. Ambassador Chen Wei stood in the human delegation section looking around at the changes. It still amazed her that they had achieved this. Not through force alone, but through standing firm when it mattered most. The assembly was in session. Today was important. Today they would formally adopt the new charter, the one written after months of negotiation and debate. President Okafor sat beside Chen. She had traveled from Earth specifically for this moment. On her other side sat Admiral Tanaka, who had become something of a legend in the past year. The admiral who defeated an enemy fleet 5 times her size. Thisserel approached the central speaking platform. She wore the formal robes of her office, but she also wore a small pin on her collar. It was a human and Valoran flag intertwined. Chen wore the same pin. Honored members of the Galactic Assembly, Thisserel began, her voice clear and strong. 1 year ago, I stood in a different version of this hall. I presented evidence of corruption. For speaking truth, my people were silenced. We were declared without voice. Our rights were stripped away. The hall was completely quiet. Everyone remembered that day. We thought it was the end, Thisserel continued. We thought we would simply fade away, destroyed by bureaucracy and political power. But we were wrong. Because humanity reminded us and reminded the galaxy that justice matters more than politics, that loyalty matters more than convenience, that courage matters more than numbers. She turned toward the human delegation. Earth risked everything to stand with us. They deployed their fleet. They faced an enemy that outnumbered them. They were willing to die for friends who had helped them 3 centuries ago. That is the kind of species we want in the galaxy. That is the kind of character we should all aspire to. Across the hall, delegates from hundreds of species listened. Many nodded. The humans had changed the conversation. Before the Battle of Valoran's Gate, the assembly was controlled by a few powerful species. After the battle, everything changed. The investigation into Kethran corruption had revealed decades of abuse. High Arbiter Kethmore and 17 other officials were now in custody, awaiting trial. The Resource Distribution Council had been completely reorganized, and the rules that allowed the Valoran to be silenced had been abolished. Today we adopt a new charter, Thisserel said. A charter that guarantees every member species has a voice. A charter that prevents any single species or coalition from silencing others. A charter that makes justice more important than political power. She held up a data tablet. I vote yes. The Valoran people vote yes. One by one, other delegations voted. The smaller species, those who had lived in fear of the powerful for so long, voted yes with enthusiasm. They had seen what happened when someone stood up to bullies. They had seen that change was possible. Even some of the larger species voted yes. The battle had shown them that the old system was broken. Maintaining it would only lead to more conflict. The vote passed with an overwhelming majority. President Okafor was invited to speak next. She walked to the central platform, and the entire hall stood in respect. It was unprecedented. Normally, only the Assembly's leadership received such honor. But Earth had earned respect the hard way. Thank you, Okafor said simply. 300 years ago, humanity joined this assembly as students. We were young, inexperienced, grateful to be accepted. We tried to learn your rules. We tried to fit in, she paused. But we never forgot who we were. We never forgot our history. We are a species that survived plagues, wars, near extinction. We are a species that knows the value of loyalty. And we are a species that will always stand up for our friends. The Valoran saved us during our darkest hour. When they needed help, there was never any question about what we would do. We would help. We would fight. We would risk everything. Because that is what friends do. Her voice grew stronger. Some of you thought we were reckless. Some thought we were barbaric for using military force. But consider this, we gave High Arbiter Kethmore every chance to do the right thing. We presented evidence. We asked for justice. We demanded the Valoran's voice be returned. Only when all peaceful options were exhausted did we fight. And when we fought not to conquer or to destroy. We fought to protect. We fought to defend. We fought for justice. That is not barbarism. That is civilization at its best. The hall erupted in applause. It started with the smaller species. but soon even the larger delegations were joining in. On Earth, the Battle of Valoran's Gate had become a defining moment in human history. Schools taught about it. Military academies studied Admiral Tanaka's tactics. Children played games where they pretended to be human, and Valoran pilots fighting together. The human frontier colonies that had been threatened by the Resource Redistribution Act were thriving now. With the Kethran corruption exposed, proper funding and supplies were reaching them. Population was growing. New settlements were being established. Admiral Tanaka had retired from active service but had not stopped working. She had helped establish the Earth-Valoran Joint Military Academy, on a moon orbiting the Valoran homeworld. Young humans and Valoran trained together, learned together, became friends. Commander Sarah Chen, who had led the Special Operations Team, now commanded the new Anti-Corruption Bureau. It was an assembly-wide organization with real authority to investigate fraud and abuse. Chen had picked her team carefully, choosing people from different species who shared one thing: they believed in justice. The Bureau's first major case had been the prosecution of High Arbiter Kethmore. The trial had lasted 3 months. The evidence was overwhelming. Kethmore and his co-conspirators were found guilty of corruption, embezzlement, abuse of power, and conspiracy to commit cultural genocide against the Valoran. They were sentenced to life imprisonment. Their assets were seized and distributed to the victims of their crimes. Commander James Park, the intelligence officer who had found the original evidence, received the Assembly's Medal of Honor. It was usually only given to military heroes. But the Assembly decided that exposing the truth was its own kind of heroism. The Valoran homeworld was celebrating. For the first time in a year, they had genuine hope. Their economy was recovering. Their voice was restored. And they had forged an alliance with humanity that would last for generations. In the capital city of the Valoran homeworld, a park had been dedicated. It was called Friendship Memorial. Human and Valoran children played together there every day. There were trees from Earth planted next to trees from the Valoran world. There were statues showing human and Valoran soldiers standing side by side. Tisserol walked through the park with Ambassador Chen Wei. It had become a tradition for them. Once a week they met here, away from the politics and the diplomacy, just two friends walking and talking. "I still cannot believe we survived," Tisserol said. "When we were silenced, I thought it was over. I thought my people would simply disappear." "We would never let that happen," Chen replied. "I know that now," Tisserol said. "But at the time, I wondered if anyone would care enough to help." The galaxy had watched the Kethran do terrible things before. No one ever stopped them, Chen smiled. "You forgot that humanity has a long memory. You saved us 300 years ago. We do not forget debts like that." They stopped at a memorial wall. It listed the names of everyone who died in the Battle of Valoran's Gate. Humans and Valoran side by side. The inscription at the top read, "They silenced justice. We answered with thunder." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Earth had not helped?" Tisserol asked. "Every day," Chen admitted. "But I also know that was never really a choice. Once we knew what was happening, we had to act. It is just who we are." In Geneva, at the Council of Earth building, a new exhibit had opened. It documented the Plague Wars, the Valoran Aid, and the Battle of Valoran's Gate. Millions of people visited every year. They wanted to see the history. They wanted to understand what happened. The exhibit ended with a video message. It was recorded by President Okafor shortly after the new Assembly Charter was adopted. "Let this be known across all worlds," Okafor said in the recording. "Humanity does not forget its friends. We do not tolerate injustice, and we will not be silent when others are silenced. To those who would oppress the innocent, we are watching. To those who need allies, we are here." The message had been broadcast throughout the galaxy. It was translated into every known language, and it sent a clear signal about what humanity stood for. On Concordia Prime, the assembly session was ending. The new charter had been adopted. The reforms were in place. The galaxy was changing. Ambassador Chen walked with President Okafor and Admiral Tanaka toward the human embassy. They passed delegates from dozens of other species. Many stopped to thank them, to shake their hands, to express gratitude. A small delegation from a species called the Rin approached. They were a frontier species, one of the ones that had been cheated by the Kethran corruption. "Ambassador Chen," the Rin delegate said, "we wanted to thank Earth. The first shots were fired by the Kethran fleet. Energy beams lanced across the darkness of space, targeting the human defensive line. The assembly commanders expected the human ships to scatter, to retreat, to show fear. Instead, the human fleet opened fire with everything they had. Admiral Tanaka stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching the tactical display. The Kethran were attacking in a standard formation, using their numerical advantage to overwhelm the defense. It was textbook strategy. It was also exactly what Tanaka had expected. "Execute Plan Alpha," she ordered. Across the human fleet, ships activated systems the Kethran had never seen before. Electronic warfare packages began broadcasting interference patterns that scrambled the assembly's targeting systems. Missiles with advanced guidance systems ignored countermeasures and found their targets. And human fighters, small and fast, darted between the larger ships like angry wasps. The first wave of Kethran ships hit the human defensive line and reeled back in confusion. Their sensors were not working properly. Their communications were disrupted, and their shields were taking damage from weapons that should not have been that effective. "What is happening?" High Arbiter Kethmore demanded from his command ship. "Why are we not advancing?" "Sir," his tactical officer replied, looking confused. "The humans have some kind of electronic warfare system. It is interfering with our sensors and targeting, and their weapons are more powerful than intelligence suggested." Kethmore's three eyes narrowed. "Then get closer. Use visual targeting if you have to. We have 300 ships. They have 67. Numbers will win, but numbers were not winning. The human ships fought with a ferocity that shocked the assembly forces. They did not follow standard engagement protocols. They used tactics that seemed reckless but were actually carefully calculated. They worked together with the Valoran fleet in perfect coordination. The Valoran, inspired by humanity's stand, fought like they had not fought in decades. Their ships, armed now with human weapons and technology, proved to be deadly effective. Captain Rethvon commanded the Valoran flagship Guardian's Hope. His ship moved in formation with 3 human destroyers covering each other's weak points. When a Kethran battleship tried to break through, the combined fire from all 4 ships cut through its shields and crippled its engines. "This is for 60 years of loyal service," Rethvon said as his ship fired again. "This is for being silenced when we spoke truth. This is for every Valoran who believed the assembly stood for justice." On the Defiant, Admiral Tanaka was orchestrating the battle like a deadly dance. She had studied every major conflict in human history. She had learned from the great commanders of Earth's past. She knew that sometimes the smaller force could win if they fought smarter. "Target their command carrier," Tanaka ordered. "All heavy weapons, focused fire." The Defiant was one of humanity's newest ships, built specifically for fleet combat. Its weapons were powerful, its shields were strong, and its engines were fast. It cut through space like a knife, heading straight for the assembly's command carrier. The Kethran tried to stop it. 6 destroyers moved to intercept, but human fighters swarmed them, forcing them to defend themselves instead of blocking the Defiant. The fighters were flown by pilots who had trained their entire adult lives for combat. They were good. They were very good. "Weapons range in 30 seconds, the tactical officer reported. "Lock all weapons on the command carrier," Tanaka ordered. "Fire on my mark." The Defiant closed the distance. The command carrier was massive, 10 times the size of Tanaka's ship. It bristled with weapons, but it was also where High Arbiter Kethmore was directing the battle. Take out the command ship and the assembly fleet would lose coordination. "Mark." The Defiant's main guns fired. Railguns accelerated projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed. Energy beams capable of cutting through asteroids converged on a single point. Missiles with fusion warheads streaked forward. The command carrier's shields held for 3 seconds. Then they failed. The projectiles punched through the carrier's armor like paper. Explosions rippled across its hull. Systems failed. The massive ship began to list, no longer fully under control. On the bridge of the command carrier, alarms screamed. High Arbiter Kethmore grabbed his command chair as the ship shook. "Damage report," he shouted. "Main power is failing," his tactical officer reported. "We have lost primary communications. Life support is on backup. Sir, we need to evacuate the bridge." Kethmore stared at the tactical display, or what was left of it. The human ship had done in minutes what should have been impossible. The Defiant was pulling away now, its shields absorbing return fire, already targeting another assembly ship. For the first time, Kethmore felt something he had not felt in years. Fear. Across the battlefield, the tide was turning. The human electronic warfare was devastating the Assembly's coordination. Individual Kethran ships were still dangerous, but they were fighting in confusion, without proper command and control. The Valoran fleet, seeing the humans strike such a powerful blow, pressed their own attack with renewed energy. Valoran ships had always been well-designed, well-built. Now, with human weapons and human tactics, they were deadly. Commander Sarah Chen commanded a special operations team on the ground. She was Ambassador Chen Wei's younger sister, and she had spent her entire military career training for missions like this. While the space battle raged, Chen and her team had infiltrated a Valoran colony that the Kethran had occupied 2 weeks ago. The occupation force had called themselves peacekeepers, but they were really there to seize resources and intimidate the population. Chen's team moved through the colony's underground tunnels. They had 20 soldiers, all specially trained. They were outnumbered by the occupation force, but they had surprise and skill on their side. Remember, Chen told her team, we are here to free the Valoran civilians and capture evidence of what the Kethran are doing. Keep casualties on both sides to minimum if possible, but if they shoot first, do not hesitate to shoot back. They emerged in the colony's central district. Kethran soldiers were patrolling the streets, weapons ready. The Valoran civilians looked frightened, moving quickly with their heads down. Chen activated her communicator, broadcasting on the Kethran military frequency. Attention, Kethran forces. This is Commander Chen of the Earth Special Operations Division. You are in violation of the Valoran territorial sovereignty. Surrender your weapons and withdraw, or we will remove you by force. The Kethran commander, a veteran soldier named Vekthar, laughed when he heard the message. This is Commander Vekthar. You have 20 soldiers. I have 200. You cannot be serious and completely serious, Chen replied. You have 60 seconds to decide. Vekthar ordered his forces to find and eliminate the human team. It was a mistake. Chen's soldiers were not regular infantry. They were special operations trained in urban combat, infiltration, and advanced tactics. They used the colony's layout to their advantage. They struck from unexpected angles. They used non-lethal weapons when possible, knocking out Kethran soldiers before they could raise the alarm. When Kethran forces did respond with lethal force, the humans returned fire with precision. Earth's weapons were designed differently than assembly weapons. They were more efficient, more accurate, more deadly in close quarters. Within an hour, half the Kethran occupation force was down. The other half was trapped in their command center, surrounded. Last chance, Chen broadcast. Surrender now. Commander Vekthar, seeing his position was hopeless, finally gave the order. The Kethran soldiers laid down their weapons. Chen immediately contacted the Valoran civilians. You are free. The occupation is over. We need your help gathering evidence of what happened here. The Valoran civilians emerged cautiously. Then, when they realized the humans were really there to help, they began talking. They told stories of how the Kethran had planned to erase Valoran culture, to replace their language with Kethran, to ship their resources back to Kethran worlds. Chen recorded everything. This was evidence that would be shown to the galaxy. Back in space, the battle was reaching its critical point. The assembly fleet had lost 30 ships. Another 50 were damaged. The human fleet had lost 5 ships and had 12 damaged. The Valoran had lost 7 ships with 9 damaged. The numbers were still in the assembly's favor, but barely. And the morale was completely different. The assembly forces were fighting because they were ordered to. The human and Valoran forces were fighting for something they believed in. Admiral Tanaka opened a channel to the assembly fleet. This is Admiral Tanaka. You have fought bravely, but you are fighting for a lie. High Arbiter Kethmore used you to protect his corruption. He sent you to die so he could avoid justice. How many more of you need to die before you realize you are on the wrong side? Many assembly ships continued fighting. But some began to hesitate. Some began to question a Kethran cruiser captain named Rathmel made a decision. He had lost half his crew. His ship was badly damaged, and he had started to wonder why he was really fighting. This is Captain Rathmel of the cruiser Storm's Edge, he broadcast on an open channel. I am withdrawing from combat. I will not sacrifice my crew for High Arbiter Kethmore's corruption. Any ship that wishes to join me may do so. 2 other Kethran ships immediately pulled back. Then 5 more. The news hit the Galactic Assembly like a shockwave. Earth had invoked Article 7. The human fleet was moving to Valoran space. President Okafor's speech was being broadcast on every network, translated into thousands of languages. The reaction was chaos. High Arbiter Kethmore watched the human president's speech 3 times. Each time his anger grew. How dare they? Earth was a young species, barely 3 centuries in the galactic community. They were supposed to be grateful for being allowed into the assembly. Instead, they were defying him. "Get me the military council," Kethmore ordered his aide. Within an hour, he was in a secure conference room with the leaders of the Kethran military. General Vathkor commanded the home fleet. General Zethmar controlled the occupation forces. Admiral Krenthar led the border security fleets. "The humans have made a mistake," Kethmore said. "They think they can challenge us. They think protecting the Valoran will somehow work out in their favor. We need to show them the reality of power." "What are your orders?" General Vathkor asked. "I am issuing an ultimatum," Kethmore said. "The humans have 48 hours to withdraw their fleet from Valoran space. If they refuse, we will engage in peacekeeping operations to restore order." "Peacekeeping operations," Admiral Krenthar repeated. "You mean war?" "I mean teaching a lesson," Kethmore corrected. "The humans have 37 ships. We can deploy 300 in the same time frame. They are outnumbered. Once they see our fleet, they will back down. They are not stupid. What if they do not back down?" Zethmar asked. Kethmore smiled coldly. "Then we destroy their fleet and remind the galaxy what happens when you defy the Kethran hegemony." The ultimatum was sent through official channels. Earth had 48 hours to withdraw or face military action. On Earth, President Okafor read the ultimatum with her council. No one looked surprised. "They want us to back down," Minister Zhang said. "Show force, make threats, expect compliance. Will we comply?" asked Representative Adeyemi. President Okafor looked at Admiral Tanaka, who was joining via hologram from the Defiant. "Admiral, what is your assessment?" "The Kethran can field a much larger fleet than us," Tanaka said honestly. "But numbers are not everything. Our technology is good. Our crews are well trained, and we will have defensive advantage. They would have to attack us. Can we win?" Okafor asked bluntly. Tanaka was quiet for a moment. "Define win. Can we destroy their entire military? No. Can we make them pay such a high price that they reconsider? Yes. Can we hold the line long enough for political pressure to work? Absolutely. Then we do not withdraw," Okafor said. "Send a response to the Kethran. Tell them Earth does not abandon its allies. Tell them if they attack the Valoran, they attack us. And tell them we are ready." While the diplomatic messages flew back and forth, another drama was unfolding behind the scenes. Commander James Park worked in Earth's intelligence division. He was on Concordia Prime, officially listed as a junior attaché to Ambassador Chen. In reality, he ran Earth's spy network in the assembly. For weeks, Commander Park had been investigating the Kethran. He knew about the corruption, the stolen supplies, the embezzlement, but he needed proof that would survive scrutiny. He needed documents, recordings, financial records that could not be dismissed. He found them in the most unlikely place. A junior clerk in the Resource Distribution Council had kept copies of everything. The clerk was not Kethran. He was from a small species called the Vin, who had no power and no voice in the assembly. But the clerk believed in honesty. He believed records should be kept properly. Commander Park met the clerk in a maintenance tunnel deep in the station. The Vin was nervous, his small hands shaking as he handed over a data chip. "This is everything," the clerk said in his squeaky voice. "Bank transfers, shipping orders, communication logs. It proves the Kethran stole supplies meant for frontier worlds. It proves they sold them for profit. It proves everything the Valoran said was true." "Why are you giving this to me?" Park asked. "Because someone should know," the clerk replied. "Because silence is the same as lying. My people have no power, but maybe your people do." Park took the data chip and immediately transmitted it to Earth through encrypted channels. Within hours, analysts were verifying the data. It was genuine, it was damning, and it was exactly what they needed. President Okafor made the decision to leak the information to the galactic media. Not all of it at once, just enough to raise questions. Just enough to make other species wonder what else the Kethran were hiding. The story broke on the independent news networks first. Small outlets that were not controlled by assembly interests. They ran headlines like "Documents Suggest Corruption in Resource Council," and frontier worlds claim missing supplies. The Kethrin tried to suppress the story. They pressured major networks not to run it. They threatened sanctions against media companies, but the information was already spreading. Smaller species, those who had no love for the Kethrin, picked up the story and ran with it. Within 24 hours, the corruption scandal was the biggest story in the galaxy. Delegates were demanding investigations. Member species were questioning assembly leadership, and the Kethrin looked guilty because they were trying so hard to make the story disappear. High Arbiter Kethmore was furious. He knew exactly who leaked the information. The humans. This was their counterattack. They were not just protecting the Valoran militarily. They were exposing the truth that the Valoran had tried to expose. "We move up the timeline," Kethmore ordered. "Send the fleet now. We crush the humans before they can do any more damage." Admiral Krenthar received the orders and began assembling the fleet. 300 Kethrin warships gathered at the border. Destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and carriers. It was an overwhelming force designed to intimidate. The assembly fleet began moving toward Valoran space. On the Defiant, Admiral Tanaka received the alert. Enemy fleet detected. 300 ships. Time to contact, 6 hours. She looked at her tactical officer. Sound general quarters. All hands to battle stations. Contact the Valoran fleet. Tell them we fight together. The Valoran had 30 ships in their home defense fleet, combined with Earth's 37. That gave them 67 ships. Still badly outnumbered, but not impossible odds. Admiral Tanaka opened a channel to all ships in the combined fleet. Her face appeared on every screen in every ship, human and Valoran both. "This is Admiral Tanaka. In 6 hours, we will face the assembly fleet. They think numbers alone will make us surrender. They think we will see their ships and be afraid. They are wrong." She paused, looking directly into the camera. 300 years ago, the Valoran helped us when we were dying. They did not have to. They chose to. Today we return that favor. Today we show the galaxy that humanity stands by its friends. The Kethrin think might makes right. They think political power is the only power that matters. We are about to teach them a different lesson. We are going to show them that courage matters, that loyalty matters, that standing up for what is right matters more than all the ships in their fleet. Her voice grew harder. "Some of you may not survive this battle. I will not lie to you. We are outnumbered, but we are not outmatched. We have the moral high ground. We have the truth on our side. And we have each other. All ships, take your positions. Check your weapons. Say your prayers if you have them. In 6 hours we make history. In 6 hours we show the galaxy what happens when you try to silence the innocent in front of humanity." The channel closed. Across the fleet, humans and Valoran prepared for battle. Engineers checked systems. Gunners loaded weapons. Pilots ran pre-flight checks on fighters. Medical teams prepared for casualties. On the bridge of the Defiant, Admiral Tanaka studied the tactical display. The defensive position was good. They had picked a location where the assembly fleet would have to come through a relatively narrow region of space. It would limit the Kethrin's numerical advantage. "Admiral," her executive officer said, "we are receiving a transmission from the Valoran flagship." Put it through. The screen showed a Valoran ship captain. His name was Rethvon, and he had fought in the Valoran's last major war 60 years ago. "Admiral Tanaka," Rethvon said, "my crew wishes to thank you. We were prepared to die defending our home, but we did not expect anyone to die with us." "Captain Rethvon," Tanaka replied, "your people saved mine. This is the least we can do." "It is more than least," Rethvon said. "It is everything. Whatever happens today, the Valoran will never forget. Neither will humanity," Tanaka said. "Now let us make sure both our peoples survive to remember." Tanaka out. The hours passed slowly. Crews tried to rest. Some wrote messages to families. Others just sat quietly, thinking about what was coming. In her ready room, Admiral Tanaka looked at a picture on her desk. It showed a little girl with black hair and a bright smile, her daughter Yuki. Dead at age 7 during the Plague Wars. Dead 3 days before the Valoran medicine arrived. "This one is for you, baby girl," Tanaka whispered. "And for all the children who did not have to die because the Valoran helped us." She stood up and returned to the bridge. "Status report. Enemy fleet entering sensor range," the tactical officer reported. "Confirmed 300 ships. They are not trying to hide their numbers." "Good," Tanaka said. "Let them think numbers are all that matter." The Council of Earth met in the underground chamber beneath Geneva. The room had been built during the Plague Wars, designed to survive anything. Today it held 70 representatives from every nation and colony. Every face was grim. President Amara Okafor stood at the head of the table. She had been a child during the Plague Wars. She remembered the fear. She remembered watching her mother die, unable to breathe, her lungs destroyed by the plague. She also remembered the day the Valoran ships arrived bringing the cure. "We all know why we are here," President Okafor said. "The Galactic Assembly has silenced the Valoran. The same people who saved our species are now being destroyed, and the Assembly is helping it happen." Minister Zhang from the Asian Union spoke up. "The public response on Earth has been overwhelming. There are protests in every major city. People are demanding action. They remember what the Valoran did for us." "As they should," said Representative Adeyemi from the African Federation. "But we must be realistic. The Assembly has thousands of member species. The Kethran alone have a military 10 times our size. If we challenge them, we could be isolated. We could be attacked. So we do nothing," asked Admiral Keiko Tanaka, who sat at the far end of the table. Her voice was sharp. "We let our friends be erased because we are afraid?" Admiral Tanaka had lost her daughter during the Plague Wars. The girl was only 7 years old. The Valoran medicine arrived 3 days after her death. 3 days. Admiral Tanaka never forgot that. She also never forgot that the Valoran had tried their best, had pushed their ships to maximum speed, had risked everything to help a species they did not know. "I am not saying we do nothing," Adeyemi replied carefully. "I am saying we need to think about this carefully." "We have been thinking," President Okafor said. "Intelligence has been monitoring the situation. The Kethran are not stopping with silencing the Valoran. They are preparing to seize Valoran assets. There are reports of military buildups near Valoran space." A hologram appeared above the table. It showed star maps, military positions, resource flows. The intelligence chief, Director Kumar, began explaining. "The Kethran have been planning this for years," Kumar said. "The Valoran homeworld sits on one of the richest rare element deposits in the galaxy. The Valoran also control 6 major trade routes. The Kethran want those resources. The corruption investigation gave them an excuse to act. The investigation that revealed Kethran crimes," Minister Zhang pointed out. "Exactly," Kumar continued. "The Valoran discovered that the Kethran were stealing from frontier worlds, including our colonies. Instead of facing justice, the Kethran used their political power to silence the accusers. It is a classic authoritarian move." President Okafor looked around the table. "Our intelligence also indicates that the Assembly plans to freeze Valoran access to the interstellar trade network. Without trade, the Valoran economy will collapse within months. After that, the Kethran can simply walk in and take whatever they want." The room was silent. Everyone understood what this meant. The Valoran were being systematically destroyed, and the Assembly was complicit. Admiral Tanaka stood up. "I have a proposal. We invoke Article 7. Several people gasped. Article 7 was the sovereignty clause, written into Earth's Assembly Charter when humanity first joined the galactic community. It stated that Earth retained the right to withdraw from Assembly jurisdiction if Earth's fundamental interests or security were threatened. Using it would essentially mean declaring independence from the Assembly's legal authority. "That is a declaration of defiance," said Representative Okafor from the European Union. "The Assembly could see it as an act of war." "Let them," Admiral Tanaka said coldly. "The Assembly just proved it is not an institution of justice. It is a tool for the powerful to oppress the weak. The Valoran exposed corruption and were silenced for it. If we stay silent, we are no better than the cowards who looked away today." "What exactly are you proposing?" President Okafor asked. Admiral Tanaka activated her own hologram. It showed military formations, fleet positions, and tactical scenarios. "We deploy the 3rd Fleet to Valoran space. We claim we are conducting joint military exercises. Once there, we establish a defensive perimeter. We make it clear that any attack on the Valoran will be considered an attack on Earth." "That is insane," said Minister Chen from the Pacific Alliance. "We would be putting ourselves between the Valoran and the entire Assembly military." "Not the entire Assembly," Director Kumar interjected. "Most Assembly species do not want this conflict. They went along with the Kethran because they were afraid. But if someone stands up to the Kethran, others might follow. Or they might not," Representative Adeyemi said. "And we would be alone." President Okafor raised her hand for silence. Before we decide anything, I want to hear from Ambassador Chen. She is on a secure channel from Concordia Prime. A screen appeared, showing Chen Wei in what looked like a small room. Behind her, President Okafor could see silver-skinned figures. Valoran. Ambassador Chen, Okafor said. You are at the Valoran embassy? Yes, Madam President, Chen replied. I met with Ambassador Thisseral. The situation is worse than we thought. The Kethrin have already started implementing trade sanctions. Valoran ships are being turned away from assembly stations. Their bank accounts are being frozen. They have maybe 2 months before their economy completely collapses. Thisseral moved into view of the camera. She looked older than Chen remembered. The stress was visible. President Okafor, Thisseral said, I do not want to ask this. 300 years ago, we helped Earth because it was right. We did not expect repayment. But now my people are facing extinction, not by war but by systematic economic and political destruction. If someone does not stand with us, we will simply cease to exist. You do not need to ask, President Okafor said firmly. The question is not whether we will help. The question is how. Over the next hour, the council debated various options. Some wanted diplomatic pressure. Others wanted economic sanctions against the Kethrin. But Admiral Tanaka kept pushing for direct action. Diplomacy takes time, Tanaka argued. Economic sanctions take time. The Valoran do not have time. We need to act now decisively in a way that makes the Kethrin stop and reconsider. You want to threaten war? Representative Adeyemi said. I want to prevent war, Tanaka corrected. The Kethrin are bullies. Bullies understand strength. If we show up with a fleet and make it clear we will fight, they will think twice. If we show up with diplomatic notes and trade restrictions, they will ignore us. Minister Zhang spoke up. There is another consideration. Our frontier colonies. The Resource Redistribution Act that just passed will cut their funding. Combined with the supplies that were already stolen, we are looking at potential famine and unrest. We cannot protect the Valoran if our own people are suffering. Then we kill 2 birds with 1 stone, Admiral Tanaka said. We withdraw from assembly jurisdiction under Article 7. We take responsibility for protecting our colonies and our allies. We make it clear that Earth will no longer follow rules that are enforced selectively to benefit the powerful. President Okafor was silent, thinking. She had to consider so many factors. The economic impact, the diplomatic fallout, the military risk. But she also had to consider what kind of species humanity wanted to be. I remember the plague wars, Okafor said quietly. I was 8 years old. I watched my mother die. I watched my neighbors die. I watched the world fall apart. Then the Valoran came. They did not have to. Earth was nothing to them. We were a young species, barely into space, dying from a plague we created through our own genetic experiments. The Valoran could have left us to die. Instead, they helped. She looked around the table. If we turn our backs on them now, what does that make us? What will our children say when they ask why we let our saviors be destroyed? The vote was called. It was not unanimous. Some representatives voted against action, fearing the consequences, but the majority voted in favor. Earth would invoke Article 7, the Third Fleet would deploy to Valoran space, and humanity would stand with its oldest friends regardless of the cost. Admiral Tanaka immediately began issuing orders. The Third Fleet was based near Jupiter's orbital stations. It consisted of 37 warships, including the flagship ECS Defiant. Within hours, the fleet would begin its journey to Valoran space. President Okafor recorded a message to be broadcast to Earth and to the galaxy. She stood in front of the camera, wearing her formal presidential uniform, the flag of United Earth behind her. My fellow humans, she began, today the Council has made a decision. We are invoking Article 7 of our Assembly Charter. We are withdrawing from Assembly jurisdiction to protect our colonies and our allies. She paused, letting that sink in. 300 years ago, the Valoran saved our species. They asked for nothing in return. Today they face destruction by the very assembly they served faithfully for 2,000 years. They were silenced for exposing corruption. They are being systematically destroyed for telling the truth. Her voice grew stronger. Earth will not stand by and watch this happen. We have deployed our Third Fleet to Valoran space. We are establishing a defensive perimeter. Any attack on the Valoran will be considered an attack on Earth. We are doing this not because we seek conflict, but because we seek justice. The Great Hall of Concordia Prime had witnessed 300 years of galactic history. Today it would witness something that would change the galaxy forever. Ambassador Chen Wei sat in the human delegation section, watching as the Valoran representatives approached the central platform. Thysserl led her people with the same quiet dignity she had shown for decades. Her silver skin caught the station's artificial light, and her forearms carried data tablets filled with evidence that would shake the very foundation of the Galactic Assembly. Chen remembered the first time she met Thysserl. It was 15 years ago, during a cultural exchange on Earth. The Valoran ambassador had visited the memorial wall in Geneva, where millions of names were carved in stone. Names of those who died during the Plague Wars. Thysserl had touched the wall gently and said, "We almost arrived too late. I am sorry for every name written here." But they had not been too late. The Valoran had shared their medical technology when Earth was dying. Billions were saved. The human race survived because the Valoran chose to help a species they barely knew. Now, Thysserl stood before the assembly, ready to speak truth to power. "Honored members," Thysserl began, her voice translator projecting her words clearly. "For 2 years we have investigated the Resource Distribution Council. What we found is not a simple error. It is systematic theft." The hall erupted in noise. Delegates from hundreds of species talked among themselves. High Arbiter Kethmore, leader of the Kethran hegemony, sat on his elevated throne, his 3 eyes narrowing. Thysserl continued, "Frontier worlds were promised aid. Medical supplies, farming equipment, defense systems. The records show these supplies were shipped. But they never arrived. The frontier colonies, including several human settlements, are starving. Their people are dying. Where did the supplies go?" She activated a hologram. Numbers and shipping routes filled the air above the assembly floor. Chen leaned forward, her heart beating faster. This was it. This was the proof. "The supplies were redirected," Thysserl said. "They were sold to private contractors. The money went into accounts controlled by members of this assembly. Members who sit in this hall today." The noise grew louder. Some delegates looked shocked. Others looked angry. High Arbiter Kethmore stood up slowly, his massive frame towering over the assembly. "These are serious accusations," Kethmore said, his voice deep and threatening. "Do you have proof, Valoran?" "I have proof," Thysserl said firmly. "Bank records, shipping manifests, testimony from witnesses. Everything is documented." Kethmore's expression did not change. He looked at the delegates around him, particularly at those who controlled the majority vote. Chen saw the silent communication happening. The Kethran had built their power over centuries. They controlled trade routes, military contracts, and most importantly, they controlled votes. "The Assembly recognizes the seriousness of these claims," Kethmore said. "However, we must follow proper procedure." "I move to invoke Code 773. Chen's blood ran cold. She knew that code. It was an ancient rule, rarely used, almost forgotten. It allowed the Assembly to silence any delegate if a majority vote declared them disruptive to order. "You cannot do that," Chen shouted, standing up. "The Valoran have the right to present their evidence." "Ambassador Chen," Kethmore said, not even looking at her, "the human delegation does not have the floor. Sit down or be removed." Several delegates who supported the Kethran were already activating their voting tablets. Chen looked around desperately. A few species looked uncomfortable, but none spoke up. The Kethran controlled too much. Going against them meant economic sanctions, closed trade routes, military pressure. "All in favor of invoking Code 773, Kethmore announced. The votes came in quickly. Too quickly, it was planned. This was not a reaction. This was an ambush. "The motion passes," Kethmore declared. "The Valoran delegation is hereby declared without voice. Their speaking rights in this assembly are permanently revoked. Their council seat is forfeit. Security, escort them out." Thysserl stood perfectly still. Her forearms lowered slowly. The data tablets fell from her hands, clattering on the floor. Around her, the other Valoran delegates looked stunned, disbelieving. "You cannot do this," one of them said. "We have evidence of crimes." "You have nothing," Kethmore said coldly. "You are without voice. That means you no longer exist in the eyes of this assembly. Remove them." Security forces in powered armor moved forward. They were Kethran soldiers, not neutral peacekeepers. Chen realized this had been planned down to the smallest detail. As the soldiers surrounded the Valoran delegation, Thysserl turned. Her eyes met Chen's across the vast hall. In that moment, Chen saw everything. She saw desperation. She saw betrayal. She saw a silent plea for help. Then the Valoran were marched out, their footsteps echoing in a hall that had suddenly gone very quiet. Kethmore did not waste time. Now we move to the next item, the Resource Redistribution Act. This will redirect funding from frontier world development to core world security initiatives. Chen barely heard the words. Her mind was racing. The frontier worlds. That included 12 human colonies. Colonies that were already struggling. Without funding, without supplies, thousands would die. I object, Chen said, her voice shaking with anger. This assembly just silenced the people who brought evidence of corruption. Now you want to vote on the very thing they were investigating? Ambassador Chen, Kethmore said, his tone showing mild annoyance. Earth is a valued member of this assembly. But you are young. You have been part of the galactic community for only 3 centuries. You do not understand how things work. The Valoran made accusations they could not prove. They disrupted the order. This is the consequence. They had proof, Chen shouted. They had nothing that this assembly recognizes, Kethmore replied. Now sit down. The vote will proceed. Chen looked around the hall again. A few delegates met her eyes, then looked away. They were afraid. The Kethran had shown what happened to those who challenged them. Even the Valoran, who had been assembly members for 2,000 years, could be silenced. The vote on the Resource Redistribution Act passed easily. Chen voted against it, but her single vote meant nothing. After the session ended, Chen walked back to the Earth Embassy in a daze. The corridors of Concordia Prime were busy with delegates and staff. Everyone was talking about what happened. The Valoran had been silenced. It was unprecedented. It was terrifying. Chen entered her office and locked the door. She sat at her desk and stared at the hologram of Earth rotating slowly above her workspace. Home, a world that nearly died 300 years ago, a world saved by Valoran medicine and Valoran compassion. She opened an encrypted channel to Geneva. The connection took a moment to establish, given the distance. Then the face of Director Hayes appeared. Ambassador Chen, Hayes said. We saw the broadcast. The council is already convening. They crossed a line, Chen said, her voice hard. The Valoran saved us during the Plague Wars. Do you remember the numbers, Director? 4 billion dead, another 3 billion dying. We were finished. And the Valoran came. They shared technology that their own people had spent centuries developing. They asked for nothing in return. I remember, Hayes said quietly. I lost my entire family in those years. I remember. And now the Assembly treats them like criminals, Chen continued. They silenced them. Not because the Valoran were wrong, but because they were right. The Kethran are stealing from frontier worlds, from our colonies, and they just proved they will do anything to cover it up. Hayes was silent for a moment. Then he nodded. What do you need? I need immediate consultation with the Council of Earth, Chen said. I need authorization to invoke Article 7 if necessary. Article 7, the Sovereignty Clause. The emergency provision that allowed Earth to withdraw from Assembly jurisdiction if its interests were fundamentally threatened. It had never been used. Using it would mean cutting ties with the galactic community. It would mean standing alone. That is a serious request, Hayes said. This is a serious situation, Chen replied. The Valoran stood with us when we needed them. Now they are being destroyed, and the Assembly just showed us that justice does not matter. Only power matters. Hayes looked at something off-screen, probably checking messages. The Council is already discussing options. There is a lot of anger on Earth right now. People remember the Plague Wars. They remember who helped us. Good, Chen said, because we cannot let this stand. After ending the call, Chen pulled up the data on the Valoran delegation. Thisseral had been taken to the Valoran embassy on the station. The other delegates were with her. They were effectively prisoners now, unable to speak in the assembly, unable to present their evidence, unable to defend their own people. Chen made a decision. She stood up, straightened her formal ambassador's jacket, and left her office. She was going to visit the Valoran embassy. Rules said she should not. Protocol said she should maintain distance. The Kethran would be watching. Chen did not care. Some things were more important than rules. Some things were more important than protocol. Loyalty was one of those things.